Jack Dorsey announcing today that Twitter will no longer accept political ads in advance of the 2020 election. Dorsey tweeting this: "We've made the decision to stop all political advertising on Twitter globally. We believe political message reach should be earned, not bought." That is in stark contrast to Facebook's hands-off policy of not fact-checking political ads. So let's discuss. Josh Green is here, Mark McKinnon. Short time, a lot to discuss, guys. Thank you so much. Josh, Trump 2020 campaign manager Brad Parscale seems to think that there's bias in the new policy, tweeting this: "Twitter bans political ads in yet another attempt by the left to silence Trump and conservatives. I wouldn't be surprised if Twitter lifted the ban after 2020. The ban applies to everyone, so where's the problem?"
There is no problem. He saw bias in the old policy. Now he sees bias in the new policy. Parscale and conservatives generally, I think, have been very effective at working the refs, at putting pressure on social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, get them to bend over backwards to allow conservatives to do things that if they stopped and thought about it, they might not. And I think that's why Dorsey made this decision. I think it's why it's a good decision. Political ads don't bring in a lot of money. As we've seen from Zuckerberg, they bring big headaches, and this is a way of stepping out and saying, you know what, I'm not going to get my company involved in this.
Yeah. Mark, you headed up advertising for 3 presidential campaigns. You also went to jail in defense of free speech as a newspaper editor. Is the best way to deal with the fake claims and political ads not to run them at all?
No, it's not. I mean, here we have 2 alternatives. There's a third way, which is to do what most broadcast stations and other responsible platforms do, which is they take a look at the content, they determine whether or not it's factual, and it's not factual. Like when we did campaigns in the old days, they'd send it back to us and say, fix it. So there's got to be some responsibility and some accountability. Mark Zuckerberg is saying we have no accountability, and then on the other hand, we have Twitter saying we're not even going to play the game. And by the way, let's be honest about this, they're only losing $3 million in revenue. So this is more of a market game, I think, about positioning against Facebook than it is about. But it's an interesting position that they've taken. But the real responsible position is in the middle, to accept the content, but accept the content that is only factual.
Boris Johnson's bid for a December general election has become a very likely prospect. That's after the opposition Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, said he'll back one in a vote in Parliament later today. And the Labour leader's been speaking. Here's what he had to say about his apparent change of heart.
There'll be a parliamentary process this afternoon. We're going out there to fight an election campaign, and I can't wait to get out there on the streets. In every town and village in this country, Labour will be there giving a message of real hope where this government offers nothing. The Labour Party loves a debate, but they also love the end of the debate. And this is the end of the debate, and we're going out there to win.
Nick Robertson's live in Westminster for us. Very upbeat senior team there on the Labour Party side, but they were forced into this, weren't they?
They were. Jeremy Corbyn says they're going to go out and have the biggest campaign they've ever had. But when the other opposition parties, the Liberal Democrats and the SNP, both said that they were prepared to support the government to have this early general election, the Labour Party was left with no other option. They were going to left to be the party that Boris Johnson would have cast as those who are standing between people and democracy. Boris Johnson is going to campaign that he is the one that's got a Brexit deal from the European Union. He is the one that's changed the terms and got more favourable terms. And it has been the others in Parliament that have been standing in the way. And if Jeremy Corbyn had gone into the election on that footing, that would have been a very, very negative start. He had no other option. But it certainly appears, and we're not there yet, the general election isn't, the snap general election isn't a done deal. There's going to be possibly amendments tabled and maybe voted on later today once the government's bill begins its reading and gets its debate here in Parliament this afternoon. But I think there's a sense as well that the SNP and the Liberal Democrats who've agreed to support the government, and this was said yesterday, also recognise that they had sort of run out of options. Neither of those parties want to leave the European Union, and the only other option, apart from a general election, because the second referendum, there isn't enough support for it, the only other option would have been to negotiate the withdrawal agreement bill, which would have ultimately led to Britain leaving the European Union. So for these parties, in a way, they've been forced into this position, but they also feel that they have something to gain. And Labour at the moment seems to be the party that potentially stands to lose the most seats in this election.
Good evening. The tone of this potentially very significant day in the impeachment proceeding was set early this morning as Capitol Hill and the White House braced to hear from the first witness who was actually on the multiple calls between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelensky. That witness, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, arrived on Capitol Hill in uniform, his body still carrying the shrapnel he received during an IED attack in Iraq and for which he received the Purple Heart. And he corroborated and expanded upon what we know about the allegations involving military aid for Ukraine. We know he did that because we obtained his opening statement last night. We also know he was prepared to say that he witnessed a pressure campaign, what he called, quote, outside influencers promoting a false narrative of Ukraine. Here's what his opening statement said about the call between the two presidents. Quote, I was concerned by the call. I did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen. He added, quote, I realized that if Ukraine pursued an investigation to the Bidens and Burisma, it would likely be interpreted as a partisan play. Meantime, Republicans largely didn't want to talk about what Lieutenant Colonel Vindman had to say, like literally didn't want to talk about it. Listen to the question asked of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and then listen to his answer.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman says that what he heard on the president's call, that conversation with the Ukrainian leader, was so concerning that he's worried that it might undermine U.S. national security. Does it concern you? Are you worried about the president's behavior at all?
Look, I'm not going to question the patriotism of any of the people who are coming forward.
He ignored the question if you didn't know.
President Trump is forever saying that Ukrainian phone call summary was
word for word, comma for comma.
Forget commas. Now people are connecting the ...
Yeah. And I wonder, right? I kept on saying ...
That's right. Technically known as an ellipsis. ...
Because in legal documents, when you see ... that means that there's something left out.
There was so much ... dotting on The View that co-host Meghan McCain got annoyed.
Whenever it said Biden, it said ... And right. I was wondering...
We got it.
We got it. Right?
I got it.
And they got it too.
But oh, the irony. The ellipsis comes back to haunt a president who is besotted by dots in his tweets. ...
He will soon be ...
President Trump's tweets are so dotty, they read like Morse code. The president might begin a tweet with a random 7 dots. He shared tweets with as many as 23. Occasionally, he mixes a stray comma in with them, or combines his dots with a typo. No smocking gun, ... Colbert once did an obit for presidential dots when tweets expanded to 280 characters. ...
Adding ...
But announcing the death of Trump's dots was premature.
The dots are back. I missed you little guys. You're the only part of Trump's tweets that aren't lies.
The other day, the president actually tweeted nothing but ... provoking responses like, anyone speak dots? And another coded message to Putin. Remember the time President Trump stared directly at a solar eclipse? No wonder he's seeing dots everywhere. Might as well blame all those ellipses on eclipses. ... Genimos. ... CNN.
This is not ... time. It's not.
New York.
The deposition this past week from the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, Ambassador Bill Taylor, was, Republican sources tell CNN, impactful and, quote, reverberating among Republicans on the Hill. Taylor detailed conversations with Trump administration officials, pushing an explicit quid pro quo in his view. He was told, quote, everything Ukraine wanted from the United States, including military aid, depended upon the Ukrainian president publicly announcing an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. The White House has been relentlessly attacking Ambassador Taylor.
What you're seeing now, I believe, is a group of mostly career bureaucrats who are saying, you know what, I don't like President Trump's politics, so I'm going to participate in this witch hunt that they're undertaking on the Hill.
There's no evidence for that, and the president then called Taylor a never-Trumper, and there's no evidence for that. And he said that all never-Trumpers, quote, are human scum. Human scum. Thousands of miles away, watching this all unfold, was one of Taylor's West Point classmates with whom he served in Vietnam, now retired Colonel Bob Seitz. Let's show this photo here. That's Seitz on the left in this photo from Firebase Rakistan in Vietnam in spring 1971. Bill Taylor is the one on the right of the photo. For 18 months, Seitz and Taylor jumped from helicopters and rucked through the jungle-covered mountainous terrain, enduring, Seitz told me, quote, fatigue, hunger, bad weather, dying, killing, and a lot of terrible wounds. They were rifle company commanders of the 506th Regiment of the 101st Airborne, the same regiment from the World War II book and miniseries Band of Brothers. The motto of the 506, Currahee, meaning we stand alone.
To Easy Company, victory, and Currahee!
Seitz told me that Bill Taylor of Alpha Company was and remains the embodiment of the United States Military Academy cadet prayer, which says in part, quote, make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. Colonel Seitz told me he has been enraged listening to President Trump and White House staffers lie and launch personal attacks on his friend Bill Taylor. Taylor even extended his tour in Vietnam an extra 6 months. None of those attacking him ever stood up for their country the way Bill did, Seitz told me. Taylor's service to his country continued as a diplomat, working for every administration since 1985, serving as U.S. ambassador to Ukraine under President George W. Bush. Former General and Ambassador to Afghanistan Carl Eikenberry telling me, quote, Bill always volunteered for the tough posting in combat with the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, Afghanistan, Gaza, the difficult spots in the Middle East, unquote. In Iraq, Taylor came under fire in both Baghdad and Fallujah. Earlier this year, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo asked Taylor to come out of retirement to head back to Kiev. Taylor was wary of taking the position after seeing how poorly the previous ambassador had been treated by the Trump administration, but his mentor had told him, quote, if your country asks you to do something, you do it. Sitting on Colonel Seitz's kitchen table right now is Wednesday's New York Times. Seitz looked at the cover photo with tears in his eyes. It shows his battle buddy, Taylor, walking into Congress to choose the harder right over the easier wrong, to not be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. Taylor is standing alone, Seitz tells me, the way Currahees have stood alone for our country. But all of us other Currahees are standing with him, Seitz said. So, President Trump can suggest that Taylor is human scum, and the folks in the White House can attempt to smear Bill Taylor. But to his friends, the president is not just attacking Bill Taylor. He's attacking the values that Taylor personifies: duty, honor, country. General Eikenberry told me Taylor's, quote, integrity and courage are the true marks of patriotism, loyal to an oath of office, and never to be corrupted or intimidated by those seeking personal gain at our nation's expense, unquote. Now you can ask yourself, of the behavior and the values you have seen displayed during this impeachment inquiry, whose make you proud to be an American and whose might make you ashamed? Currahee.